Welcome to Design Downtime, the podcast where we celebrate the joys of living a balanced creative life. I'm your host, Guy Siegel, a design director in Toronto, Canada, and I invite you to join me on this journey as we redefine what it means to be a successful design professional. Let's break free from the shackles of hustle culture and embrace the full spectrum of human experience, because life is too precious to be spent only in pursuit of productivity. Today, I'm delighted to talk to Erika Flowers. Erika is a technologist and designer who brings a love of storytelling into everything she does. By day, she helps organizations shape strategy and design for the future, and by night, she writes sprawling novels and explores the craft of story as a lifelong passion. Erika has worked at tech companies such as Intuit and Mural, as well as serving a term at NASA as a civil servant as part of their digital transformation initiative. She currently works in medical technology, innovating in the field of diabetes and insulin management. Erika, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
And you want to talk today about writing fiction or writing a series of fiction novels.
Yeah, everything I do is in service of hopefully someday getting, widespread mainstream audience and readers and even, listeners, watchers of big stories. I don't write literature and I don't do anything that is to have artistic merit. I try to, if I was forced to say what do you want to do? I tell people, think of your favorite, most well done, what you would consider like the pinnacle of the Marvel movies. I want to have that type of feeling. Like, I'm not trying to write the next English Patient or Schindler's List. I'm trying to write the next Captain America, the Winter Soldier, or the first Guardians of the Galaxy, or Infinity War Endgame, where, I'm like, those are like some of my favorite movies ever. And I've seen Citizen Kane, but I'm not trying to become an artiste. I am trying to become a entertainer. And that has been what I have found makes me want to do it is, I love creating it. I love writing it. I love the passion that I put into it, but I do it because I want to see people be entertained and I want their feedback.
So I'm really curious about that dichotomy you have between something that is designed to entertain and something that is more artistic in nature. How do you define the two of them?
When I say I want to design to entertain, I enjoy doing it either way. And I've worked with other writers, people who write novels and whatnot. And we talk, we collaborate, we write together, whatever. But then they just want to have enjoyed the writing experience. And then I'm like, okay, now we have to get this in front of people. And so that dichotomy, I always go back to my comparison is the way I write books and I've done other formats I'll talk about too. But when I approach it's book writing, I process it all through the form of the novel and the series. It's Penn and Teller. To me, it's a Vegas magic show in the form of pages. And so Penn and Teller don't come up with these crazy mind-bending tricks that, are so different from every other Vegas magician. And they just do it alone in their garage. They do it to get up on the stage and see if they can get the whole room to be like, oh my God. And so to me, that's my goal. And so people say, oh, I love to write. And I say, well, writing is actually really hard work and not very fun. I love to have been read. That's what I love. I just got a message from someone this morning who is reading my books, and it was a LinkedIn person. It was like a professional contact. And they're like, I want to try your books. And they're on book 3 over the last month. They're like, I can't put this down. And they messaged me I just got to this chapter. Oh my God, I had no idea. And they're talking about the twists and turns. And this person is they're pretty sharp. They're teasing stuff out about the motifs and the flow and the format. And they're like, oh, I love how you do this and this. And I'm like, I don't even know I was doing that. But yeah, so yes, of course. And that's all I want. I want to have people say, and this person, they said, I love how you're using the lack of information as information for your characters, because it's like a galactic space opera, espionage. This series is Tom Clancy in space. And she's like, I love this motif about how the absence of information is constantly what the characters are using to make decisions. And they're basically using the void of information as information. And I'm like, that is true, but no one's ever said it back to me, noticed it. And that person noticing it and giving me that feedback. That's all I live for. Literally all I live for. I would quit my job tomorrow and just be a writer who hangs out on Reddit in my own subreddit, talking with people and answering emails and going to fan cons. And I would sign autographs until, my hands turned into skeleton bones, not even for any money. I don't even care about money. I don't want money. All I want is people to have been affected. I've been like, wow, that was such a worthwhile experience. You gave me this universe to go and spend some time in, because that's what the authors I needed when I was young. That's what they did for me. And I've got all the book series I think back to where it's like, without those worlds, without those authors, I would have had nowhere to go in my horrible, horrible upbringing. Fantasy novels and sci-fi novels were the only world I could exist in. And I feel like I have to put those worlds into our world so people can escape into them.
That's a great segue into a trip down memory lane. What were some of those series that sort of opened your eyes to this world?
I was reading like kid books young, but they weren't anything that like hooked me into that, like, oh, there's these whole universes, because they were like young, like elementary school style books. But I got turned on to the first big like novel length series, like big spanning fantasy epic in middle school. And it was the Sword of Shannara series. And that first book, 726 pages. Before that, I'd been reading books that were like 100 pages long. And I remember the page count. And I couldn't believe that you could read a book that had such a sprawling world and universe. And there was 3 of them. And so I read all 3. And then that was the end of that series at the time. And this is like the mid 90s. And so then I got turned on to the thing that just changed my whole creative career. And that was the Dragonlance books. And there's hundreds of them. This was like 94, maybe 93, 94. They were written by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. And when I read those and I saw the level of depth of like the complexity of the plots and the complexity of the worlds and themes, and how you could show not just like the battle between good and evil, but like micro relationships between just specific characters, or how you could show how people react to authoritarianism, how people react to genocides, how people react to all these different things through the lens of like fantasy. And those Dragonlance books, I mean, I was hooked. I probably started with that first one, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, which is the first one in the whole series that kicked it off. I probably read 50 or 60 before I read anything else through like 7th grade and 8th grade. And I was just completely enthralled that this world just kept going. And I knew it wasn't like high literature, and I knew it was like based to be tie-ins to the TSR Dungeons and Dragons role-playing modules, which I never played. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, like pen and paper. I was just like, oh, I'm in this world of the Dragonlance. It was like a real place. And I tried to read the Tolkien books. I hated it. I'm like a quarter of the way through the Fellowship of the Ring in middle school. I never picked it up again. I couldn't stand it because it was not the same thing. It was a literary allegory of World War I. And I'm like, this is boring. Like, I'm not getting off on these pseudo histories. Same thing with the George R.R. Martin books. I tried reading the very first Game of Thrones book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series. I'm like, okay, I do not want to read like Middle European history panache, like translate through the lens of high fantasy. Like, I want these things that are set in stuff that are almost like the video game worlds you can live in, and not retellings of Middle European, history, which is what those intentionally were. I'm not criticizing Martin and Tolkien. They came and said, Tolkien was like, this is a allegory for World War I. George R.R. Martin was like, this is the War of the Roses, like England, like, and so it's like, it's boring. And the things that make that interesting to some people just like aren't interesting to me, which is fine. Like, I read graphic novels. I read comic books in the same way that people read high art. So people even like Kevin Smith, I look to that, and I look to like graphic novel authors like Alan Moore and before he was canceled, Neil Gaiman, and like whatever, because to me, they're doing it in a different format, but it's also a different, it's a different feel where it's much more about the holistic world and not the literary aspect. Like there's no like larger world to literature. Like I can't stand like the books you have to read in school, Catcher in the Rye, Hemingway, like all the classics. It's so boring. But I will reread like the 10-issue All-Star Superman series, which is great. And then I'll be like, how could I turn this into an 800-page novel that explores the like tug of war inside of Clark Kent's heart on was he using more Clark or is he more Superman? And I've always wanted to write, by the way, a really, really serious attempt at a novelization of an all original Superman story. And I think that that is as worthy as any other story, right? In college, we had a mythology class, and in that class, we studied Achilles and Odysseus, and we read Ovid, and then we read Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood's End, and then we read some Superman because the professor wanted to show us how Arthur C. Clarke was doing like modern mythology in the, I think Childhood's End in the 50s or 60s, and then the lens of Superman as being literally the exact same creation for us in the modern day as Achilles was during the time when Homer wrote the Iliad. Like Achilles wasn't a real person. It was a character to sell books. It was in form of an epic poem. And that's how I see it. So like I'm either like your college English professor's favorite student or their least favorite student. Cause I'm like, oh, literature is boring.
This is where the usual first question of the podcast comes into play, which is the origin story. Reading those series of books, when did you start thinking, I want to do that?
I was already a short storyist and writer. My mom had a electric typewriter with a backspace key, and I was doing that already. And then once I saw how novel and series length projects worked, I saw right away. I started trying to write fantasy novels. I was 13, and I've never not been like working on one or had one in my mind or planning or plotting one. And now I finally got to the point where I could at least put something out and finish something and take it for real. But I've always had it. I probably every single night when I go to sleep, I don't sleep good. I never have. And so I probably spend an hour or two every night just in bed, just like mentally in a mind palace, working on the stories, working on the plots, being like, okay, I'm going to like pull this series or this project out of the mental archive, and I'm just going to figure out this certain plot or this certain exchange or this certain whatever I think is interesting. I'm going to figure it out here. Like Einstein, just to compare myself to Einstein, because I see a lot of similarities in our genius. So I'm just kidding. But Einstein used to go ride his bike around in a figure eight in the whatever college or whatever to think. And so I do that, but I don't think about like quantum physics. I think about the next book, and if I'm on a long drive, I'll just lock in and think about it. If I'm trying to fall asleep, if I'm doing whatever, I just lock in and dissociate away into like the mental studio of the next book or graphic novel or audio drama or whatever. And like, I'm never not working on it. Now that I have the capability to produce the like commercialized product, that's like a whole other challenge of where's the time and space and money to finish and refine and market and follow through. And I at least I've done it once. And now it's kind of like climbing Mount Everest the second time. It's not that fun anymore. Like the novelty of wanting to climb Everest the first time really drives you. The second time, now it's just work. And you have to say like, am I a professional mountain climber or not? And with the day job, it's really hard to go all in because, bills to pay. You can't, I could easily plan out a 8 to 10 hour a day writing career and operationalize it overnight. But how or if that even gives you a subsistence lifestyle is questionable. But I think the way technology is going, I think the way that direct to consumer and AI powered, tools and just kind of the shortening of the distance between a person and a creator, with examples like Patreon and YouTube and all the TikTok, all these different platforms. It's like writing novels is nothing like being a TikTok star, but it is in the fact that there's like, I'm not going to say there's not like a middle person, because there is, but you couldn't be like a self-employed like video content creator decades ago without being like on like public access TV, like Wayne's World. And so now, like if someone catches fire on YouTube or Instagram, like you can totally reach an audience. And again, I'm not trying to get rich. I'm trying to get the opposite. I'd love to go into debt getting people to read my stuff. But even that, like, it's not a money problem. Like, I have money. There's no way to spend my money into readers' minds. You have to do it just through the labor and persistence. And that's harder where, I had young kids, but now I have older kids. And so I'm looking forward to being able to just focus on that and not the child rearing, parenting years.
So as you were looking into, writing your first series or your first novel, how did you know how to approach it? Did you reverse engineer the other series you loved, or was it an intuitive thing for you to understand the structure, how to approach it?
Oh, that's a great question. It took me literal years. I made a really good, like a real attempt at it. Like right when I started college, I didn't actually get the first draft of a first book written until I was, I think, 37 or 38. And it took 16 years. I knew that there was like a way to do it that wasn't just vomiting words out onto the page. And no matter how hard I try, I couldn't get through it. I couldn't push through. It's kind of like if you wanted to like run a super marathon, like 100-miler, just waking up and trying to run 100 miles every morning, you're never going to do it. You can't. That's not how it works. You would have a plan and you'd go a little bit at a time and you'd train, you'd cross train, you'd have diet, you'd have all these different things. And so I finally, through kind of like a really dark, deep depression around my birthday in 2018. So I don't know, at 37. Yeah. I just said, I just have to try this. I have to like do it. And that was April. And I sat and planned. It took till August of that year. So it took 4 months just to start. And I took that time and I used the Mountain View Public Library, and I checked out something like 80 books in total, probably about 40 of which were like every writing book of the last 100 years, everything from Strunk and White to Orson Scott Card had this rad book it's called Character and Viewpoint. I read Stephen King's On Writing. I read like textbooks, manuals. I mean, the nuts and bolts. I read Zen and the Art of Writing by Bradbury. Just like, okay, how do we do this? How do we do this? I read books that were like produced by Reader's Digest on like punctuation and whatever. I went and studied writing styles. Like my writing style actually copies Jane Austen as like the first person who did it. It's called free indirect discourse. And that's where the narrator can actually speak as the character. And so you wouldn't just say, Guy, puts on a sweater because it was awfully cold in the house during the podcast. You would say, Guy puts on the sweater because it's awfully cold. Brr, is this heater ever going to be fixed? And that like, is this heater ever going to be fixed is the narrator talking, but it's actually the person talking. And that was Jane Austen's thing. And like Brandon Sanderson, who's my current favorite fantasy author, kind of does the same thing. And so it's not done in the first person. The narrator is still this disembodied voice, but somehow the narrator is the character speaking about themselves in the past tense in the third person. I had to learn how to do that and practice it. And so I treated like learning like how to write words on the page and how to construct a commercial grade novel all that summer. And then I made a spreadsheet with a word count and a burn down sheet. I treated it like Scrum or Agile, where it's like I have this many words a day. If I'm ahead, my burn down will say for the month, I'm ahead by this percent. And here's my velocity, because I was trying to get ready to do NaNoWriMo that November, where the National Novel Writing Month, for the listeners, you try to write a 50,000 word novel in a month in November. And that ends up being 1,633 words a day, 50,000 divided by 30. And I'm like, I get it. And I didn't think I would do it. I didn't think I would do it. It was so hard. I would cry. I wrote like 300 words in the first day. And I sobbed and blown. I'm like, I'm never going to be able to write a book. Never. I like, this is crazy. I just can't. I kept going. And then November hit. So it was August, September, October, November. I got through NaNoWriMo. I wrote all 50,000 words. I couldn't believe it. And I have the spreadsheet that showed it. And then I just kept going. And I wrote for 9 months. And I finished this first manuscript. And it was about 320,000 words, which is like 900, like single space Times New Roman, 8.5 by 11 pages. I was like, I did it. Oh my God, I did it. And then I knew how to do it. And then I had to learn how to edit it. And then I had to learn how to produce it. And then I learned how to whatever. So learning all those skills, I mean, this took years. Like, this is something that I don't know how other authors do it and just get it out. I think it's the difference between like someone who's like a natural athlete and someone who's not. And that one who's not has to practice and train so much harder than the natural talents. It was like that old, what was the movie, The Rookie? It was Kevin Costner or whatever. Like, I felt like that. Like, I'm 37. I'm trying to write a novel, reading about all these people who just like Brandon Sanderson, who he's like my productivity idol, would write these manuscripts as the night clerk at a hotel and just crank them out and just put them in a drawer and then do another one. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm a designer, right? I can't write my way into a finished draft. I have to design my way into it. And once I figured that out, I learned how to operationalize my overactive imagination, which has always been there, into productivity. And now, when I have the actual time in the day, I never get writer's block. I never have to think about what I have to do because I can convert imagination to output instantaneously because I developed the system. It's just like being an athlete. Like, I'm wearing my Steve Nash jersey for all the listeners. Steve Nash is my favorite basketball player. He has like a 99% free throw percentage for his whole career, 99%. The first time he shot a free throw, he probably didn't make 99%. So he had to learn to shoot them. And now, even though he's been retired for 15 years, he could probably walk up to a free throw line and just sink it 100% of the time with the occasional miss because he knows exactly how to take the ball from his hands into the hoop. I had to learn how to do that because I don't have a shortage of creativity. I have a shortage of execution. And so that's like the origin story. I mean, it took decades. And I don't know how the Cinderella stories of people who just sit down and crank out books and get them published. I don't know how they do it. That's not how I do it.
There's this very simple dichotomy with people who write. There's those who outline everything ahead of time. There's those who fly by the seat of their pants and just write as they go. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
I think that I have way less emphasis on the writing on the page part, that I'm flying by the seat of my pants, but I'm not doing it through the typing part. I just get to the typing dead last. And so this is kind of like the difference between a composer, like a jazz composer who just gets down and riffs and plays and just figures it out, versus a written composer, like a lot of the classical, they start on paper and you can see the music and how it'll sound and look in the different parts by the notes on the page and the staff and like all the little symbols of a rest, a quarter note, or whatever, a hold, whatever. Like, my son's doing guitar right now. It's self-taught and he does it the same way. Like, he will sit on his computer and write a guitar part visually on the computer and can understand what it'll sound like and maybe kind of play it as he goes, but do it and then read his own music and play it. Right. And so I'm like that. And so for me, the music starts on the page. Starts with the quill and the ink and the staff. And I write the notes, and I had to learn how the notes work. And I can read a little bit of music as a hobby. I can like read sheet music and hear it and understand it because I know how to read music. So I can start there. And that's what works for me because, again, I'm a composer. I'm not a musician. I'm a world builder and story crafter. I'm not a writer. I'm not a novelist. My dream would be to produce the script and the story and the content for a graphic novel and have an artist execute the graphic novel and the lettering and all that. Or I produced my first series in parallel at the same time as an audiobook, and I released it as a podcast, as twice weekly audio drama episodes. And so I would much rather create the story and the characters and like the product and then have voice actors read the parts and perform it. And that's where the people who write, like the Seed of the Pantsers, I'm a hyper architect. I'm way more like a producer. I'm like Dr. Dre. I produce the record. Sometimes I sing, but to me, my love of music is at the mixer. My love of writing is in the mural sticky note board and the outline view in Scrivener, and writing like, okay, this character and this character, what's their dynamic? How does their interpersonal drama drive the plot forward, or like whatever? And then getting to typing it on the page and like punctuation and language. It's the last part of it. And it's the part that I enjoy the least. I find it to be very difficult. I find it to be very frustrating. And I only enjoy it when it works. But when I write something and I see it and it does work, that's like the most glee I can possibly feel. When I'm like stuck on a scene, it's like this, whatever. And I don't mean the plot. I mean, how does this actually show up on the page? When I finally figure that out, I'm like, oh my God, because that's when I hear the music for the first time. But I'd already written the score. I'd already written the symphony. I just haven't heard it played yet. And then when I hear it played for the first time, I'm like, this is all I ever want to do for the rest of my life.
So you said something that's really important. You said waiting for it to work or getting that to work. You're a designer. You're looking at this as you're releasing a product and you want people to get delight out of it. How do you know you're on the right track? How do you test that?
At first, I didn't. And so it was very speculative. And this is kind of like one of those questions that separates, I think, people who really, really want to do it versus those who just think it's interesting. And Steven Pressfield talks about this a lot in his book, Turning Pro. And he's a screenwriter and would sell scripts to Hollywood, really famous screenwriter and like script doctor. I did it the first time. And so I was just like, I don't actually know. Like, I know what I read and what makes things interesting. Or you kind of infer, like, why was like The Martian, the movie, was a self-published blog at first by Andy Weir, and it got turned into a movie, then turned into a book. People don't know that. It was a blog at first that they optioned for a movie and then consolidated into a book. I loved it. I read the book first when I saw the movie was coming out. It was exciting, whatever. And I kind of look at it and go, I think I can figure out why this is exciting. I can see the matrix a little bit. It's like, what makes certain tropes, what makes certain tension and drama and the flow of things work. And you can see it in TV shows, with any type of fiction. You can start to kind of get a sense about how, like, oh yeah, the way that this certain like time tested way that stories unfold, this person did a really good job, and you're blown away. Like when Rocky loses to Apollo Creed in Rocky 1, but he's just happy he went the distance, and him and Adrian celebrate. We were all so overjoyed. He didn't even win the fight, but that wasn't the point. And it was like, that was set up by Stallone the whole time. And Stallone, by the way, one of the best writers ever, as far as that, like a medium of movies, you know, not just actor. Like, he wrote Rocky. That thing is a work of art, 20th century literature. So I had no idea, but I had a feeling, and I'll tell you how it started. This is a exclusive, we say in the business. I'll say it on the podcast. My book series that I did publish, the science fiction ones, I had this idea. And the idea was a brother and sister. One is, the sister is like a super spy, like space, Cold War era, CIA, like whatever. The brother is kind of just like a mercenary pirate, just kind of like, you know, whatever, on the other side of the conflict. Like he's a Soviet-born mercenary working in South America. I'm using just like Earth metaphor, right? And then they get pulled together to have to work together, even though they're on different sides of nations, right? And so set it up in space. And so Samantha is the main character. She's this galactic super spy, like just like the Machine, because it's supposed to be like a Tom Clancy book. And her brother, Decker, he's just like a space vagabond mercenary. He's got a ship. He's like a Han Solo. He doesn't care about anything. And suddenly they have to be brought together, and they're on opposite sides of like the Empire versus the people out in the fringe and whatever. I'm like, how cool would it be if they have to work together and interact, and they are on different ends of this galactic ideological spectrum, and they're not even a part of the same like space federations, right? They're foreigners to each other. How cool is that? Because they won't hurt each other. No matter what happens, that was the whole point of this book, was like, no matter what happens, Samantha will never use her violence and her super spy skills against Decker, which means Decker, as somebody who is not on her team, can stop her and manipulate her. Decker's like a good person. He's like a really good person, like heart-wise. So now where Samantha is used to going in, assassinating, sabotaging, operating under this like, spy that is outside of all laws and whatever, her brother can literally just put a stop to all that, but she can't do anything about it because the sibling bond and the sibling like power over each other is greater than all that. I'm like, how cool will that be? And then force them to do this thing where she's trying to save the galaxy from like a hostile takeover of a coup of the leader of the space navy who wants to kill the high imperious, the emperor, and she's trying to stop it. And then her brother gets involved, and she's used to just like taking out anyone who stands in her way, tell it's her brother. That was the start. It was just that one simple mechanism. And then the whole thing dovetailed out from there and became a whole book and a whole story. And that is what I was like, people will find that interesting. Like the question was like, how do you know what will react? I didn't know. I just had an idea that if it has intrigue and certain types of plot twists, but they're not cliches and people get really invested. And if you juke them, they appreciate it because it was unexpected. It was well earned. But I read about it. I read like how to write a story to where readers appreciate the mystery and the suspense and the drama and the like back and forth, and it doesn't feel cheap. And so I tried to replicate it. But the bigger question is I didn't know. So I had to finish a book and get it out there in front of people as a prototype. I had to prototype it. And so that's what I did. I did it over COVID in like the lockdown years, 2020, 2021. And it was like, if I can just get this finished, I can get people to read it. And but what changed my whole life in this regard from that day forward was I got it out there in the podcast format and in the weekly format. And then I got the books there. And then I got people started to read it. And then I got some readers and they loved it. And I started to get feedback and emails. I got reviews on the podcast. I had people buying the stuff on Amazon. I had people emailing me. I had people telling me, and this is like, I don't want to sound like I'm self-aggrandizing, but they were like, this is the best book I've ever read. This is incredible. When's the next one coming out? And then I was like, changed everything because the prototype worked. All the work I put in to create something that mimics. I always say to everyone, I want a book that would feel like you bought it in the airport bookstore and you're reading it on the airplane. Like it has to feel like it came from Barnes and Noble. This is not indie publishing and it's not my art. It is a commercialized product. And when people liked it, I was like, I did it. Now I know that like a massage therapist who knows how to give a good massage, I know how to give you a good story massage to your brain. And then it's like, well, now I'm addicted. And that's all I can think about. It's all I think about every day. There's day jobs and politics. And oh my God, it's all just such a distraction from massaging people's brains, with these stories. So that but I had to make a prototype. I had to put in about 2,000 hours is what it took to make that first book series. And so it took that, and that's the lifetime that came before that. And I also spent about $15,000 on editing and artwork and narration. I'm in the whole 2,000 hours, which is like a work year, and another 15 grand just to get my first indie self-published thing off the ground. But once I learned that people like it, once I delighted some people, and once I knew I had what it takes, like Steve Nash, to sink those free throws 99% of the time, everything else in my life is just a delay and a distraction from getting back to that full-time plus.
Does that mean that everything you learned while doing this is writing now easier for you?
Yeah, the whole creative process is the coming up with stuff, the producing it, the buckling down and getting it out. It's easier for me because I know what to do in the same way an athlete knows what to do. Like Tiger Woods wasn't good at golf from the start, but you learn the whole process. You learn all the surrounding process. How do you get your clubs ready? How do you drive a golf cart? How do you do all the things besides just the swing? It's like you get used to it like it's athletics. And so now truly, the only part that's left that is difficult to overcome is the energy expenditure and the internal emotional self-support to do it. And then it takes just so many hours in the day because I don't do 5K fun run. Like I run super marathons. And yeah, I could get down and dabble on a page or two and kind of scratch that itch. But like my only purpose in life, if novels are super marathons, is to run these 100-mile marathons. As an amateur with a day job, how many 100-mile marathons can you train for and run in a year? Right. And so that's where it's like the moment I can stop spending my time with like a normal 9 to 5 and do this, I will. But my goal is to be a world famous ultra marathon runner and like Ironman triathlete, not go on a jog. And so that's where it's like, I'll keep jogging, I'll keep training, I'll be ready. And the moment I can go pro, that's what Stephen Pressfield's books are about, I will. And I just happen to have had superseding obligations with, kids and work and like the ups and downs of having that kind of, you're parenting and providing and working really. I guess I'm blessed, but also cursed to have these extremely high demand consuming jobs. It's like, well, I'm going to keep my skills sharp. And luckily, unlike athletics, there is no age limit on being like a commercialized creative, writer. And so I'm 44. My 50s are going to be like, I'm getting on that New York Times bestseller list, or I'm getting a Netflix series option to my stuff, or I'm going to be at Comic-Con with people in costumes of my characters as I sign my graphic novel. And even if I don't, I'll at least get to attempt to. And, if our reach does not exceed our grasp, what's heaven for? I'm pretty sure that's like Browning or Keats.
What are you currently working on?
Well, I have 2 buns in the oven and one that still kind of has some work. So I have a finished story. And I have a finished book, let's call it, that hasn't been written on the page. And to other people, that might be like, you have an idea. It's like, no. I have about a 6th draft of a finalized, full-on story. And like, we're probably less than a year away from an AI just being able to do it for me. But like, I have every page, every chapter, every character moment, every scene, every twist. This book is done. I'm on the 5th draft of my book, but it's all in sticky notes and mural and in fragments like that. And these huge, it's kind of like my service blueprints, these huge maps of the book. And they have thousands. I mean, like, I think my mural that outlined this book, just one book, I think it's something like 50,000 words, which is a novel, like a short novel. You know what I mean? This book will probably be, 350,000 words, which is like an 800-page book, but it's like a sci-fi kind of dystopia novel. So that's an appropriate length, but it's done. I would just have to start typing, and I've typed the first chapter, and I want to put that on LinkedIn for people to like read and get excited about. So that one is like ready. And if I could finish that, get it written, get it to the editor, that could be something to be produced. And then I have the 5th book in the book series I already put out, and they're shorter. And it's, since it's the 5th book in the series, it's a different type of project because I don't have to establish characters and world building. I don't have to establish any of the like setup stuff. So those 2, I am doing everything I can to get them going. And so, I mean, I work on them. I do type on them. I produce them. Like I said, I have that chapter written. I need to, get it edited and make it commercial worthy, get some early readers. And it's every time I get the free time to do it, those 2 projects are like the next things. And the space opera, those 4 books I put out, they're good and they're entertaining and people have loved them, but they're definitely like what do they call it? Like the debut author, like the first thing. It's like, it's good. It's like, no, it's good, but it's like, it's not the great. This other one, this sci-fi dystopia one set on a frozen Earth, that it's kind of like, what was that Korean movie about the train? Snowpiercer, right? It's kind of like that. Like, it has to do with a dystopia and a totalitarian class divide regime through the lens of a frozen, planet, right? That I'm like, this is a real book. Like my other book is like a fun book. This could actually be a real thing. I'm like, this is at that level where if I could finish this, I would have to market it and sell it as like adult contemporary, like a New York Times dystopian speculative fiction. where it's not going to be like Cormac McCarthy, The Road or whatever, but it's not going to be a book that people are going to say is a prose version of a graphic novel or a comic. They're going to say, oh, this is a legit speculative fiction, dystopian, adult novel. And that's what I want to do. And its level of maturity and complexity, I've really tried to bake in like all of the tropes and the things that people like around that like higher order, like really like Handmaid's Tale, right? Like Handmaids, you could have done that like low concept and made Handmaids kind of less sophisticated and simpler, but Atwood wrote it. And then like the TV series, like no one would watch the TV series, read the books and say that that's like lightweight fiction. It's super serious. But the concept, I think Handmaid's Tale is very science fiction, right? Or like Children of Men, science fiction, Interstellar, like, right? Like this is kind of like, imagine if Christopher Nolan did a book about 500 years in the future, Earth's mean temperature is 0 degrees Celsius all the time. And that's like what I kind of going for. So I have those two things. And then I have a big epic sprawling fantasy that I have it plotted out to be about a 10-book series, but I haven't quite found the like core of that yet. Cause I've that one, I found the core of the characters, but I'm like, what are they doing for 10 books? They can't just walk. I'm not Tolkien. They're not just going to walk from place to place. And so I haven't quite figured out what these characters are actually doing, but I have the characters developed. And that's I'll say this last because we're kind of going long. My one, like, if you would say weakness as a story person is I think in character arcs, character dynamics, and exploring motifs and themes through the story, I am not good at the plots about like what happens. And so I've had friends who were like, I have this idea about how a zombie outbreak, it starts during the big San Francisco earthquake in the early 1900s. And when the ground opens up, it releases spores. And so now they're dealing with like, it's like the year 1900 whatever, this huge San Francisco earthquake, and there's all the fires, it's mayhem's going on. But at the same time, a zombie apocalypse is starting and nobody knows what to do. And the zombies are like going around while the earthquake is happening, like the aftermath of the earthquake. That's crazy. I'm like, oh my God, that is such a good idea. I never would have thought of that. I'm like, so what's the story? Like, who are the characters? Like, what's going on? And they go, I have no idea. I'm like, what's it about though? Well, it's about the zombies. I'm like, yeah, but like, is it like a family and like someone turns, or is it like the police chief or the firefighters and they're trying to fight zombies, like whatever? I'm like, I don't know. I just told you it's about the zombies and the San Francisco earthquake. And so it's like, oh, now I get it. You have this rad idea, but you don't know who is experiencing it or what it's about. And I would have an idea about like, what if a brother and sister found themselves on the wrong side of a conflict? And you're like, okay, what's the conflict? I'm like, I don't know. It could be pirates, or it could be space. It could be civil war. It could be they're cave people in, the Anasazi village. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's about a brother and a sister on opposite sides of a conflict. And you could set it anywhere. They could be on the Titanic with Jack and Rose in the background, because to me, it's like, who cares? It's about a pair of siblings on the opposite side of a conflict. And then I have to come up with like, okay, cool. What conflict? And I'm like, oh shit. Then I just go to Chat GPT and say, give me like 10 ideas for places where this could happen. That would be really interesting. And that's why I love AI. I don't want to talk about AI because that's a separate topic for like a different episode. But I do use ChatGPT to come up with stuff that I don't care about. Like in sci-fi, I'm like, invent some sci-fi weapon or technology that this character could be talking about. And it'll come up with that. I'm like, oh, that sounds great. I'll tweak it. I'll put it in. I could care less about the whatever device that we have to save to stop the whatever from happening, because I'm more concerned about how a father and a daughter are having to reunite through the lens of this sci-fi whatever. And that's where it's all about the story and not the plot. And I had to learn the hard way the difference between the story and the plot.
This is awesome. Erika, where can people find you?
I'm only on social media on LinkedIn because in this day and age, where else would I go? So I'm on LinkedIn. Just go to LinkedIn, and I think my LinkedIn name is Hello E Flowers. And then if people want to see the books and stuff, my author's website is erikaflowerswrites.com. And my name is spelled Erika. There's no C. And that's where all of my cool stuff is as far as this goes. And there's like a YouTube trailer for the book, and you can get them on Amazon. And if people ask for the ebooks, I just send it to them. I don't care. I mean, I'm not going to make like the $1.50 I make from Amazon if you go and buy the paperback or read the ebook. It doesn't matter to me. So check me out. You can just type my name into Amazon now. I've been on there long enough. At least it comes up. And leave me a good review if you read it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
This is all for this episode of Design Downtime. Thank you for joining me, and until next time, I hope you enjoy your downtime.